I am an African.
I'm going to look at one country in particular. Like, let's just look at as we like to talk about Zambia a lot, we can look at the situation in particular. So, as mentioned before, these effects are going to be felt in the oil and fertilizer. But I think Zambia, it's going to be a bit of a sad situation, right? In the sense that Zambia had these big wins that had occurred previously with inflation finally hitting single digits for the first time in such a long time. The Bank of Zambia had slashed rates because of all this happening. It's almost like the economy was starting to get back into it. The currency was hitting all-time highs. Zambia was sort of riding this massive copper price wave, and people were enjoying that. But then here comes this huge risk that's can threaten to curb that. And I believe the presidential aide, I think, Shanky, you can correct me, Mr. Jito Kayumba had actually mentioned, if I could find it, I'll put it on the screen right now. He had mentioned earlier already, kind of trying to get ahead of, the potential effects of this war. He had come out and said, hey, the government is doing great things, but then this war might actually, might counteract some of the things that we have started to do. And also to add to that, I think, is the fact that Zambia is also sort of been another positive was that Zambia had restructured about 95% of its debt. I think that could be a bit higher now, but I could be wrong. 95% of Zambia's debt was already, restructured, and, we're looking forward to now dealing with the rest of that. And to do that, of course, the Zambian government had to, really do a number of measures, and one of them was sort of cutting their budget deficit like massively. I think right now the financial minister or the minister of finance had announced that in 2026 he wants to hit the lowest budget deficit we've seen in a number of years, I think since 2011. And a lot of that is going to actually, of course, the government is going to try to spend less, but a lot of it is actually going to come through increase in taxes and as well as increase in other payments. I think that was mentioned. I don't know if they implemented it, but they did mention an increase in the contributions that, these toll booths, these Airtel Money, MTN Mobile, these mobile money toll booth owners. And so you can see there was this idea to sort of increase, the taxing of citizens. And now if you add that to this potential increase, people in Zambia were already, financially pressed. We had this amazing interview with Mr. Tazana Kaulela. I always butcher his name, but we can maybe put it on the screen if people want to go and check it out. But people in Zambia were already, sort of financially pressed. You had a power situation and all these types of things. But now increase in fuel prices, potential increase in food prices. And then on top of that, the government still has to restructure this debt. And there is a possibility that with this war going on, with this potential increase in inflation, that the central bank might have to raise the rates. That's another concern, right? Which would, again, make the situation for the normal Zambian really, really tough to live in. As mentioned before, if interest rates start to increase, then the bonds that, people have been talking a lot about bonds in Zambia. So just to reiterate what a bond is essentially a loan, right? So normally when you go to a bank, you ask them for money, they'll give you the terms of the loan, how much you're supposed to pay for how long, etc. pp. The same thing can happen when it's a company or a government asking for money in order to do something like build a school, build a hospital, build a road. You can give them money as well as a loan, and essentially they'll be paying you back at an interest rate which is called a coupon rate, and they'll be paying you back at whether it's semi-annually or annually for a determined number of years. Right now, the Zambian bond market has, ever since HH stepped in, has been doing relatively well, and there had been an increase of people purchasing, local people also discussing these things. But if the central banks do increase the interest rates, which I predict they will do, if of course this war continues to get out of hand, then we will probably see that the price of the existing bonds in Zambia will fall. Now, if you're already locked in your bond, this might not have a huge effect. However, if it does make it a bit more illiquid, and it will make, and not only that, but for the government itself, it makes it more difficult for them to borrow as well. So that also puts another huge problem for the state, right? I think that's mostly everything I have on Zambia. It's really have to just wait and see how this war plays out. And as I said before, the other issue that's happening right now is that we haven't the reflection of these war in the prices hasn't really happened as much. The issue is that people might start panic buying, similar to COVID-19 with toilet paper. People might start, panic buying when it comes to oil and all these types of things. And that's actually what could cause a more, exacerbated
But
increase in the prices. But yeah. Yeah, I believe Zambia does have oil reserves, but I need to I couldn't find how much they do. Let me just check. I don't know how real this is, but this is from, when you ask Google now, it just gives you like an AI response. But it says Zambia has no known proven reserves of oil, crude oil, and it relies entirely on imports to satisfy its fuel needs. So yeah, I thought they had some, but I
wow.
guess not.
Also,
Yeah.
can I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, I think I was done with the
So, like you said,
presentation.
so the oil from Iran is refined. That's why African countries are still scrambling because what Nigerian oil, Angolan oil, even Libyan oil is not refined. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know about all those countries in particular, but most of them, yes, they basically extract the oil from the ground, but they don't refine it. But I do think that Dangote does have a refinery.
I heard Angola, I saw some headline, I don't know whether
I need
it's
to
true or
check.
not. They said Angola is building a $500 million refinery. I know in Nigeria there's the Aliko Dangote refinery. But yeah, that's really cool. Maybe we should view the Don Corleone of trade and finance, since I was the
No,
Don
no, no, no,
Corleone
no,
of
not
IR.
even close. Not even close, bro. But that's,
Can I
but
just,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I think Nathan has, no, you wanted to say something. I need to look more at the history between Zambia-Iranian relations. Yeah, so I mean, there's not much to talk about really between Zambia and Iranian relations, but it's been there is an established diplomatic relationship from the 1960s and 70s, from the Shah's era onwards. I think the biggest thing that stands out when I search Zambia-Iranian relations is the 2004 crude oil agreement between Zambia and Iran, which Iran agreed to export 90,000 metric tons of oil per month. I don't know how far that went, whether it was implemented, but Chinese media sources from 2005 say that that actually happened. So it was supposed to reduce oil exports, reduce fuel costs. And at that time, the president of Zambia was Levi Patrick Manawasa, and the president of Iran was Ahmadinejad. The supreme leader was Ali Khamenei. The idea was to also cut out intermediaries via government-to-government trade, and I think that's when basically Zambia-Iranian relations peaked. Trade levels also very low. There's not much evidence of Iran being a major partner in terms of trade with Zambia. Whilst, as I mentioned before, Senegal, Kenya, Tanzania have strong trade relations. So it's not really institutionalized. There's no ministerial to ministerial type of relationship. In 1993, Zambia saw the election of Frederick Jacob Titus Chilua, who was seen to be more Western aligned, departing from Kaunda's more non-aligned stand. He cut relations with Iran. Chilua actually accused Iran of supporting UNIP, which was the United National Independence Party, Kenneth Kaunda's party, before he came to power. And then in 2001, relations restored with one joint communique to resume ties at ambassadorial level. So there was also a message from 2003 from Mohammed Khatami, who was the president at that time before Ahmadinejad in Iran, talking about stronger ties between Zambia and Iran. So yeah, that's generally. Then in 2008, there was a high-level interaction in a multilateral setting, not bilateral. So Iran's deputy foreign minister met with Zambia's foreign minister during Manawasa's funeral in 2008. They discussed sectors from health, agriculture, energy, as well as oil cooperation. Iranian's ambassador most recently in 2015 presented his credentials to Edgar Lungu, who was the previous president of Zambia. Zambia doesn't have an embassy in Iran, and Iran's relation with Zambia is handled with its mission in Cairo. I wouldn't be surprised if they have an embassy in South Africa and it's handled in there, because Iran does have, how can I describe this? Existing and stable relations with South Africa. That's also interesting because South Africa has also spoken about how they do not want to be part of a sphere, Ramaphosa said, sphere of influence. South Africa has been on a number of occasions, especially within their own opposition. DA leaders like Helen Zille, who's running for mayor of Johannesburg, have accused South Africa of having too strong ties with Iran at the cost of the relationship with the Western world. So South Africa's ANC, primarily ANC government, has sort of held their ground on their relationship with Iran. Iran, I think, is also a member of the BRICS Plus, the wider BRICS, one of the new members. So that's interesting. And obviously, the United States is not a fan. And yeah, so that's pretty much
What
it with regards to Zambia-Iranian relations.
what do you think this war is going to do to Zambia? From your perspective, what do you think
From
is
your
going to
perspective.
happen?
First of all, Zambia, what is going to do to what's going to do to Zambia? I think the most important thing is, what is Zambia's position? Zambia's position, how has Zambia voted? Zambia voted against Iran on the United Nations General Assembly vote recently. But Zambia is not, I think currently President Hichilema is trying to maintain some kind of strategic ambiguity vis-a-vis United States and Iran. Iran is not a major partner, so the cost will not directly, in terms of trade, will not affect Zambia, but the cost will
No,
affect Zambia in the manner
no, but it
that
will
you,
affect. Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah.
what I'm saying.
Mainly the
The manner that you
economic,
said,
right? Yeah.
yeah, the economic, the potentially agricultural side of things, the cost of oil, especially given Zambia is having an election in August, in what, 5 months or
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that will have an effect on
That's a big one.
the voter who drives, or the voter who uses paraffin in their saloon or in the
Do
barber
you
shop.
think that
Will
the
affect them and will think about it as they vote. Yeah.
do you think that voters are going to look at the situation and be like, oh, well, he's dealing with, like, these are not an effect of the current government's economic policies, and these are an effect of.
Most likely not.
Yeah.
The average voter is not engaged with geopolitics and international relations in the Middle East,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very hard for them to draw that correlation. And in most
Mm-hmm.
cases, even when the government overemphasizes the fact that it's a global issue and they can't do anything to look like an excuse, the government will probably be more wiser to talk about what they are doing to mitigate the issue within their capacity, within their power. I don't think voters will believe they have no powers. They will not be forgiven for that. I'm not saying that they will lose, but I don't think
Yeah.
voters will buy it. So if they will vote for them and if they will
Mm,
win, it would not be because of how the excuse was. It would be for other
yeah.
reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's
In terms of, but yeah, what I was trying to say, what I was trying to say before is, in terms of direct relationship, I don't think Iran really cares about what Zambia has to say, what
no,
Zambia has to think. It's not in the periphery whatsoever, really. Even when it comes to
that
trade,
wasn't.
Kenya is, Djibouti is more
Yeah.
critical, Somalia far more critical, Egypt, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I should have mentioned that, but yeah, Sahel, and there were big meetings between Sahel leaders, yes,
Yeah.
between Iran, just
Because
before the Ayatollah.
yeah. Yeah, I think the major things are, really the economic factors, because people say that if oil, I don't know if it will hit $200 per barrel, but if it does, then it really, really, really is going to, like, really pinch. I think another method, I think, that I forgot to mention, in how many countries are also going to be affected, because I think I didn't want to talk about this because I wanted us to simply focus on Africa, but a major way that this closure of the Strait of Hormuz it's affected the world's manufacturer, which is Asia, right? And the Asian markets, I think, when I don't know how they're doing right now, but I remember when the war started, they just took a dip. South Korea took the lowest dip it's taken in a very long time. I think China was also was really affected as well. Now, if a country like if our major importer or a major trade partner like China is hurting or Asia is hurting, then that's also another way that, Zambia is going to be affected because if, a lot of things that we import also comes from China, right? So if they increase their prices, sorry, you can go ahead. You can go ahead. I mean, we're just discussing right now, so you can go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point that you mentioned China because President Hichilema actually talked about it when he met a group of people from Citibank. He often doesn't like talking about geopolitics. He doesn't really have much to say when it comes to geopolitics or wars or anything like that. He really is a stickler for the economics and the money. It's all about where is the money? Where is the money?
Yeah.
Honestly, that's all what it's that's all on his agenda. And he says this thing. He says this thing. What happens in one place affects everywhere, and so on and so forth. That's he attributes the quote to himself, but Kofi Annan did say something similar to that, which is true regardless of where the yes, it's true.
Yeah.
Regardless of where the source is from, it's true. The Chinese, we always say, oh, the trade to Zambia with the United States is low, so the tariffs won't hurt us. But then it's the tariffs that are on China that will affect us. In a similar way, it's the
Precisely.
impact on China of Strait of Hormuz that will impact Zambia directly. As you mentioned, other countries,
Precisely.
whilst Asia is the manufacturer, Africa also has critical geopolitical choke points. Strait of Hormuz is a choke point that is the most well known because of Iran and on the peninsula on the Gulf. This is not Africa, but it's an example of a Strait of Hormuz on the African side is the Bab el Mandab, which is in Djibouti and Yemen. That area is basically the passage to the Red Sea. Now, Iran has Houthi aligned militia on the southern part of Yemen. Maybe we could get a map to show on the southern part of Yemen. And they have been there since 2015 during the long Yemen war. And they are still there. They might have been battered a bit because they tried to invade Saudi Arabia, but they are still there. And Iran has talked about retaliating and using that potentially. Now, once you use that, the Red Sea, the blockage of the Red Sea would be quite devastating because now it's the Suez Canal, the only route to
Right.
go in the most feasible amount of time from Asia to Europe. And then many ships would now have to sail around all of Africa, which would be incredibly costly, one. And then also the waters around the Cape of Good Hope, that area is quite tumultuous. They're notorious
Violent.
for
Yeah.
treacherous waters, of course, and so on. The violence is more so around what is expected around Yemen, around
No, no.
Puntland, the edge
I
of
was
Somalia.
I used the term violent as no, I said I used the term violent to describe the waves.
The waves, yeah, no, violent waves indeed, yeah. So that's one thing. And then there's also now, you see, I always say World War III is impossible because World War III requires the whole world. When World War One happened, World War II happened, it was basically empires fighting and they bring along huge swaths of the world with them. But right now, there's just no appetite for it. But at the same time, that also means countries can abuse your reputation. There's a lot of maritime vessels around the seas, the Indian Ocean, the Gulf of Aden, around Yemen, into the Red Sea, the Bab el Mandab, a choke point between Djibouti and Yemen, on the coast of Kenya, that are flying flags from African countries because they are aware that Iran is not trying to target African countries. So people are masquerading. Some countries, I'm not going to mention which ones because I don't actually know. I haven't read in depth, but some countries are masquerading as African countries to pass without harm. India, for example, has been allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz a couple of times. I think about 22 ships have been allowed to pass. Narendra Modi was able to negotiate with the president of Iran. They were allowed to pass and reach the Gulf. India has lots of diaspora around there, the Middle East. So this ambiguity or strategic ambiguity, just like shutting up and not and minding your own business, is kind of a good idea because Iran is on a spiral and they are happy to attack pretty much anyone that thinks they can try Iran, and they have the bandwidth for it. This is a population of
Right.
90 to 100 million people and a GDP of about $440 billion. This means it would be the second or the third largest economy in Africa. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's a pretty good place to end the podcast. I think we've already gone past 1 hour. Yeah, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and yeah, be on the lookout. Thank you for joining us.
I am an African.